Our next guest is a student at the Oakland University William Beaumont School of Medicine and recently had an experience saving a life out in the field. Her name is Meghan Brown. She joins us now on the Oakland County Megacast. Meghan, thank you for being with us today.
Hi, thank you guys for having me.
Thank you for being on. How have you been over the course of the pandemic?
I've been good. I've kind of been, like you said, I go to OUWB as we call it for short. But I'm originally from Traverse City, Michigan, so I spent a lot of the time during the pandemic up north with my family.
So, Megan, recently, well, you were up north with your family. You had an experience when you were out grocery shopping with somebody in distress. Tell us that story about how you sprung into action and helped this person.
So, um, like I said, I was up north in Traverse City for most of the time, but my grandparents lived down in Oakland County, in Rochester, and we were going down to do a grocery run for them, my mother and I, because they're elderly. My grandpa has some history of lung issues, so we didn't want them leaving the house. And our family members, we kind of all took turns buying their groceries and going out and getting them household essentials. So it was our turn, and we were down there at a local Kroger. And when I tell this story, it just blows my mind how everything really lined up perfectly for this event to happen. So I'm very familiar with the store that I was at. I shop there often, but this particular day, I couldn't find some of the things on the list that I was looking for. So it took me a little bit longer than it normally would. And once I finally got everything, we were leaving the shopping center. And as we were pulling out, there was a man who was walking into one of the pharmacies down the street, and he was kind of wobbling a little bit funny. He looked like he might be intoxicated, and then he just collapsed to the ground. And immediately I called 911, got a hold of the EMS personnel, and they said, "Are you able to go assess him for injuries? Can you check if he has a pulse?" And immediately I was like, "Yes, I can do that." With the pandemic going on, I put my mask on, I put on a pair of gloves, and I kind of ran up to the man. His face had been turning bluish purple at that time, and I checked him. He had a laceration on the back of his head he was bleeding from, and he unfortunately did not have a pulse at that time. So I updated the emergency responders on what was going on, and they said, "Do you know how to do CPR? We need you to initiate CPR immediately." So I said, "Yep, I am trained in this. I can do it." And I performed CPR on him for about 7 minutes until the EMS first responders arrived to the scene.
So, Megan, as a student, you were trained in this, but to do it in real life and during a pandemic, did you have any hesitation?
To be honest, it didn't even cross my mind. It was just something that I had to do. I felt like I had the responsibility. I knew what I was doing. I had to get out there and help him. So I just took the necessary precautions being in a pandemic. I put on my mask, I put on my gloves, but I didn't feel like there was any hesitation there. But it was pretty cool to be able to do that outside of the hospital. I'd only done CPR once before, and that was in the hospital with surgical residents, attending physicians, nurses, staff, all supporting me and kind of instructing me the speed I should be going at and the amount of pressure I should be putting. But this time, I was kind of all on my own, and it was a different experience for sure.
So many things probably going through your head. Were you thinking of all of those steps? And then when you're in it, is it just the training taking over? And it's exhausting giving people CPR. I think the general public doesn't realize what goes into it.
Yeah, you are using your whole body when you are, putting that force on their chest to keep their heart beating. I would say there was definitely a lot going on in my mind at that time. I know that I was mostly focused on keeping the pace and using the right amount of force. And I could tell that I was doing it correctly because I could see the blood flow returning to his face. He started to pink up a little bit. Um, and there was a lot going on. Once we started initiating CPR, some bystanders started coming up, and I kind of just blocked them out and focused on helping the man and doing what I needed to do at that point.
Megan, have you spoken to him since the situation? How's he doing?
So I haven't spoken to him personally, but about a week and a half after the incident, his son actually reached out. He got my contact information from the first responders, and he texted me thanking me for helping his dad. At that time, he was doing well. Since then he had moved to a cardiac rehab facility, and I have spoken to the son again since then, but unfortunately he had another cardiac event while he was in rehab and recently passed away. But his son was extremely grateful. He reiterated again that they were so thankful that I gave them a few extra months with their dad, and they were able to, have that time with him before he did pass.
This experience, how has it changed you in your thought process for finishing med school, or is this now you're all in?
Well, I never really wanted to go into any emergent field. Emergency medicine wasn't something that I was interested in. I always thought that I wouldn't be able to handle the pressure. But after this, I feel more confident. I actually just finished this week my emergency medicine rotation, so I felt a lot more comfortable going into that rotation and getting involved, doing some hands-on things with people coming into the emergency department. And another thing that a lot of medical students talk about, we discuss it a lot actually at our school, is imposter syndrome, and kind of feeling like you don't have the training or you're not good enough to actually help. And after this event, I can say that I don't even have an ounce of imposter syndrome in me at all. I maybe did before, but now I know that my training has paid off, and I feel very confident that if I were out in public again and another situation were to happen, that I would be able to help.
I'm sure his family is so grateful that you were there at that exact moment to be able to help him. What has this been like to be a medical student during the middle of a pandemic?
It definitely has disrupted our training a little bit. Like I said, I was up in Traverse City. A lot of our clinical training was over the internet. So it was via Zoom meetings such as this one, lectures online, um, telemedicine visits with patients. So it's definitely been disrupted in that way, but also in some other more unfortunate ways. Like, I want to go into ophthalmology, and normally during July and August, we would be completing what's called an away rotation, where we would be essentially auditioning at other hospitals for a position in their residency program. But this year, all of the away rotations are canceled. So it's been really hard to kind of connect with other programs and, show them who I am as a student and future physician.
Meghan Brown with us on the Oakland County Megacast on a family of TV and radio stations. In terms of plans for the fall, you do. My notes do say that you graduate medical school next year. Do you believe that in the fall it's going to be a little more difficult, even now with all the different changes in place at many universities and the preparations that they have to continue forward as much as normal as possible as a medical student, or do you believe that with what you've already experienced and what the university's already been through in terms of adjusting for these classes, that it's going to be business as usual?
I think it's going to be a little bit of both. So my school personally, Oakland University William Beaumont School of Medicine, has been really great at trying to accommodate us and helping us get through this difficult time. They've offered us online courses for fourth year credit that helps ease our load a little bit. And this year, like you said, I'll be graduating in May of 2021, which means this fall I'll be interviewing for residency positions. And they've already determined that all of those interviews are going to be virtual, such as this one. So that's definitely going to be different from the usual. But I think they have us back in the hospital again working, and a lot more protective, personal protective equipment that we need to wear. But other than that, it feels fairly normal to get back, and I'm glad to be back and working in the hospital again.
Well, Meghan, we thank you very much for joining us today.
Thank you so much for having me. It's been a pleasure.
We appreciate it. Meghan Brown, she's a student at Oakland University's William Beaumont School of Medicine, and we thank her for being on with us today.